Welcome back to the most mind-blowing biblical timeline you've ever heard. In part 2, we discovered something insane. Shem, Noah's son, the actual ark survivor, was alive for 150 years while Abraham walked the earth. That's right, a 600-year-old eyewitness to the flood was breathing the same air as the father of faith. But here's what everyone's asking. Did they actually meet? Think about it. Abraham, searching for answers in a world full of idols, and Shem, a living encyclopedia who saw God destroy and rebuild civilization. What if they sat down together? What stories did Shem tell? How did a conversation with a flood survivor shape Abraham into God's chosen one? Today, we're answering the question, what happened when these two legends crossed paths? Plus, we're busting 4 massive myths about Abraham that'll change how you see faith forever. This is the episode you've been waiting for. Let's dive in. And hey, if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that button now. Some Jewish traditions suggest young Abraham may have actually met Shem and learned about God's dealings with earlier generations directly from a flood survivor. Imagine sitting with someone who walked off Noah's Ark, hearing firsthand about the rainbow promise, the global judgment, and God's faithfulness. That's the kind of connection Abraham may have had to ancient history. Here's the reality. The Bible does not explicitly record any conversation or meeting between Shem and Abraham. No verse says, "And Shem spoke to Abraham," or "Abraham visited Shem." While we can prove chronologically that their lifespans overlapped by 150 years based on the genealogies, the Bible is silent about any direct interaction between them. But what if they had an encounter? 150 years is a long time, and there was no streaming or social media back then. They can talk all day. Let me get this straight. Shem lived for 600 years. 600 years. That's not a lifespan, that's a geological era. This man saw many things beyond what we can imagine. He was 100 years old when he had his son Arphaxad. Talk about late-stage parenting. Then casually lived another 500 years like it was no big deal. The record just drops this like it's normal. Oh yeah, Shem, he just kept going and going and going. Here's where it gets wild. Shem died 502 years after the flood. Abraham was born about 352 years after the flood. Do the math. That means when baby Abraham showed up, Shem was already a 450-year-old ancient legend, just casually still hanging around. And they overlapped for approximately 150 years. 150 years. If they have met, that's not just knowing someone, that's having centuries of coffee talks. Imagine this scenario. Shem was out here living his best life, probably bouncing baby Abraham on his knee and telling him, "Back in my day, the whole world flooded, and we lived on a boat for over a year. What's your excuse?" Young Abraham, "Grandpa Shem, tell me a story." Shem, "Well, kiddo, let me tell you about when it rained for 40 days and 40 nights and the entire world was underwater." Abraham, "No way, you're making that up." Shem, "I was literally there. I helped feed the lions." Abraham, "No way, you're making that up." Shem, "Kid, I was literally there. I scooped elephant poop for months." This is insane because Shem wasn't just some distant ancestor Abraham heard about in ancient bedtime stories. He was a living, breathing primary source. Forget history books. Abraham could have gotten first-hand flood survival tips. "Hey, great-great-grandpa Shem, what was Noah like?" "Oh, you know, intense, really into wood projects." And he didn't just meet baby Abraham and peace out. No, this man stuck around for another 150 years of Abraham's life. That means Shem was there for Abraham's terrible twos. His awkward teenage phase, his wedding day, and when God told him to pack up and move to mystery destination at age 75. Talk about commitment to family. Most of us can barely make it through Thanksgiving dinner with our relatives, and Shem's over here like 150 years? That's nothing. Let me tell you about the ark again. Picture this. Abraham's having his 10th birthday party, cake and all, and 460-year-old Shem shows up like, you know what this reminds me of? The time we had to ration food for every animal species on Earth, and everyone's groaning, Grandpa Shem, please, not the flood story again. But Abraham's sitting there wide-eyed, taking mental notes, because when a 460-year-old tells you about surviving the literal apocalypse, you listen. The wild part? This wasn't some distant ancestor Abraham only knew from family legends. Nope. Shem could literally pull Abraham aside and say, let me tell you what it was really like before the flood. I was there. I remember the cities, the people, the whole pre-flood civilization. Also, pro tip, giraffes are surprisingly high maintenance. Forget history books. Abraham had access to a walking, talking, 450-year-old Wikipedia with personal anecdotes. Imagine the conversations. Baby Abraham crying, Shem, 450 years old. Oh, you think you have problems? Let me tell you about the time I spent over a year on a boat with 2 of every animal. Teenage Abraham, ugh, my life is so hard. Shem, kid, I watched the entire world get wiped out. Perspective. Adult Abraham at 75. God's calling me to leave everything and go to some mystery land. Shem, now 525. Oh, that? Yeah, God's kind of into that whole trust me and figure it out as you go thing. Just roll with it. Worked out okay for us on the ark. If Shem died 502 years after the flood and Abraham was born 352 years after the flood, their lifespans overlapped by 150 years. Translation: the guy who rode out the apocalypse on an ark lived long enough to watch Abraham grow up, start his journey, and probably give him advice like, listen kid, when God tells you to go somewhere, just go. Trust me, I've seen what happens when people don't listen. So yeah, Shem might have been a direct source of historical and spiritual knowledge to Abraham. This is like if someone alive today personally knew someone from the year 1875, except way crazier because we're talking about pre-flood civilization. Talk about an unbroken chain of oral tradition. The real question is, did Shem ever get tired of telling the flood story at family reunions? Yes, Uncle Shem, we know about the ark. You've told us 50,000 times. Bottom line, history isn't just dates and numbers. It's living, breathing people whose lives connected in ways that blow our modern minds. This probably shaped Abraham's unwavering faith in God and his belief that he would fulfill his promises. Or perhaps it was God's way of preparing Abraham to become the future father of faith, a journey that began when he was 75 years old. What Abraham teaches us today. Abraham's story demolishes several myths. Myth 1. You need to be perfect for God to use you. Abraham lied about Sarah being his wife twice in Egypt and in Gerar. This is self-protection. He was afraid that evil and powerful people might take his beautiful wife and kill him. Abraham is aware of Sarah's striking appearance, even at around 65 years old. Abraham laughed at the improbability of having a son because of their old age. He was 99 years old at that time when God appeared again, and Sarah was around 89 and unable to have children. In an attempt to fulfill God's promise, he had a child with Hagar instead of waiting for Isaac. Despite his flaws, he continued to trust in God. Myth 2. You need to know everything before you obey. Abraham left Ur not knowing the destination. He believed God would give him descendants without knowing how. He obeyed before understanding. Myth 3. God only works through people with religious backgrounds. Abraham came from idol worshippers. His spiritual heritage was zero, yet God chose him and used him mightily. Myth 4. You're too old to start something new. Abraham was 75 when he left Haran, 99 when God made the covenant, and 100 when Isaac was born. Age didn't disqualify him. The heart of the matter. So why did God choose Abraham? Not because Abraham was perfect, extraordinarily talented, or religiously superior. God chose Abraham because God had a plan to bless all nations and needed a starting point. Abraham responded to the revelation with faith rather than skepticism. Abraham was teachable and willing to learn God's ways. Abraham became a spiritual father who would pass faith to future generations. God's sovereign grace selected Abraham as an act of divine love and purpose. Abraham believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness. Faith, trusting God's character and promises even without physical evidence, was what made Abraham righteous in God's eyes. Abraham, the prototype of faith for all believers. Abraham believed God, and because of his faith, God accepted him as righteous. Closing thought. Abraham's life teaches us that God doesn't call the qualified, He qualifies the called. From an idol-worshipping family in ancient Ur to becoming the father of nations and God's friend, Abraham's journey proves that faith can transform anyone. You might feel unqualified, too old, too broken, or too far from God. But remember, Abraham didn't start with perfect faith. He started with a willingness to believe when God spoke. He was inspired to embrace belief when God called. That's all it takes. God is still looking for people today, not perfect people, but believing people. Not those with impressive religious credentials, but those who will simply say, "Yes, Lord, I trust you," and take the next step. Biblical principle and closing quote. And without faith, it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to Him must believe that He exists and that He rewards those who earnestly seek Him. Abraham believed, and it changed everything, not just for him, but for all of human history. Let me leave you with this profound truth. Yet he did not waver through unbelief regarding the promise of God, but was strengthened in his faith and gave glory to God, being fully persuaded that God had power to do what He had promised. May we all have Abraham's kind of faith, the courage to trust God completely, even when the path ahead is unclear. Because in the end, it's not about where you start, it's about who you follow.